Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Today podcast. I'm Lawrence Smith, the editor of Kentucky Today. This week, an example of what it looks like to obey God, even if it appears not to make sense. I sat down with a man who left a successful legal practice in Georgia to help troubled kids in Kentucky. His name is Louis Hatcher, and he's now the legal counsel for Sunrise Children's Services. Hatcher's story is both interesting and inspirational. First, tell me about you and how you came into the practice of law.
Well, I grew up pretty much in rural areas. My family moved a lot. My father was in the retail grocery business until I was about 10, and then we went back to his hometown, and from there we were farmers, and I grew up on a farm. Oddly, the reason I really wanted to be a lawyer, I think, was twofold. One, love Perry Mason. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Perry Mason shows, but I loved Perry Mason, and I wanted to be like him. Another was Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. He was a person who was committed to doing the right thing, even if it cost him his reputation and his standing in his community. And that played into growing up in a rural area where a lot of the people are poorer or maybe sometimes uneducated. They can be looked down upon and taken advantage of. And I believe that by becoming a lawyer, I could help to remedy some of those situations. So that's what pushed me toward the law. And
you had a very successful practice. You were part of a very large firm in Georgia, right?
Yes, sir. For our area, it was a large firm, about 20 lawyers, give or take some, depending on the time. Our law firm has turned out a lot of judges, and for a small rural law firm, we had two presidents of the State Bar of Georgia come out of our firm, as well as president of the Young Lawyers Division. So we were very active in the community and in the State Bar. Yes.
So how did you first become aware of Sunrise and then begin to support it?
Well, my wife and I have a longtime friend that we actually went to high school with, Barry Stumbo, who lives in Lexington, Kentucky. And so Barry and I went to high school together and then University of Florida together. And so we would come to Lexington, loved coming up here. And on one of our visits, probably about 14, 15 years ago, we met Dale Suttles. I was just struck immediately that this is a man who loves God, who loves children, who just had a true passion to serve the Lord by serving children. And so my wife and I, he was with Big Brothers Big Sisters at the time, but we were so impressed. We started writing a check to Big Brothers Big Sisters in his honor. When he moved to Sunrise, we really had not ever heard of Sunrise, but he moved to Sunrise, and so we thought, well, we'll continue to support Dale. And we didn't know a lot about the organization, knew a little bit, but then that all changed on one of our visits up here. A lady who worked with Dale said, Louis, you and Aveline have supported us for a long time. Would love for you to come visit one of our campuses. And we agreed to do that. And the campus she took us to was the Danville campus, where a lot of the more severely abused and neglected children, are housed. So we went, and this was a real turning point for us in supporting Sunrise. We went in a big room. The children were working on art projects or something. So we just were walking around talking to the children, and I will never forget this. And it may sound strange to some people why it had such an impact on me, but it did. But a little boy, he was 6 years old, blonde hair, never forget what he looked like, walked up to us because when we were introduced, my wife and I were introduced as Mr. and Mrs. Hatcher. They came up from Georgia to see y'all. And so this little boy walked up and he said, "Did y'all really come all the way from Georgia just to see us?" And I said, "We sure did." And I said, "Aveline, can you talk to him?" I walked off and I started crying. Because it just broke my heart for a child to be in such awe that someone would care enough about them to come see them from another state. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I understand a little better now, having worked with Sunrise and become more involved with it, why that child was so in awe. And that is because, some of the children that are housed by Sunrise, that are cared for by Sunrise, will have family members very close by who never even come to visit them. So I can see why he would be perhaps amazed that someone would come from another state to see them. But that's sad. That's just heartbreaking and sad. When we left the facility, my wife and I said, you know what? We got to start writing bigger checks. And Dale Suttles will never turn down a bigger check for Sunrise, I can tell you. So we started writing bigger checks, but then we started studying the organization more and seeing more about what they were about. And that showed us that this not only, we knew Dale was a special person, and we knew some of the people we met working at Sunrise were special people, but then we realized this is a special organization, and it's full of special people, and we need to be more involved with that. So we continued our financial support. When we would come up on trips, we would bring towels and soaps and detergents and things that the children needed. So that's how we became more involved up to that point. Yeah.
It sounds like that was the moment Sunrise kind of moved from your head to your heart.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yes, sir. It did. After that, I started thinking about Sunrise a lot. And Dale and I even talked several years back about me maybe coming up and working with Sunrise. And I wanted to do that, but it just seemed that the timing wasn't quite right at that time. And even though I can be impatient sometimes, I have learned that the Lord's timing is way better than mine. So,
amen to that.
Yes, sir.
Now, I understand you also kept a very close eye on a 2021 dispute between Sunrise and the administration of Governor Andy Beshear over LGBTQ issues. Sunrise, of course, was holding to its Christian conviction on that, and it almost cost Sunrise its state funding. Talk about how that case intrigued you and made you even more interested in Sunrise.
Yes, sir. I've been litigating cases for 35 years. I've done a lot of trial work, a lot of litigation. And while I understand that there can be various viewpoints held in good faith, all of those viewpoints can't be correct. And the only standard that we can really look to determine whether our viewpoint is correct are the scriptures. We can't look to what society thinks, because that, even if we wanted to, that changes over time. And what might be right today will be wrong 5 years from now. So, but the only moral standard that we can look to is the one given by the only one who has the right to give moral commandments, and that's God. And as Sunrise was being faithful to God's commandments, they were being faithful to God's word, as they always have been. And it really bothered me that Governor Beshear, and I don't want to attack him, but I do want to attack his position. It really bothered me. He professes to be a man of faith, and I don't question that. I do question where he comes down on how he interprets scripture based on the positions that he has taken, and more specifically with respect to Sunrise. But he was simply wrong. He was wrong from a scriptural standpoint. First of all, and that should have decided it for him, quite frankly. And he was wrong from a constitutional standpoint. I think a lot of the radical left people overlook the fact that the Constitution expressly, in its very text, expressly states that we have the right to exercise our religion freely. And we don't give up those rights because we decide to serve people. That's part of who we are as God's people. We're supposed to be servants of God's people. And Sunrise had been serving the children of Kentucky. And then Governor Beshear, and there are other governors who have tried to do the same thing. Other administrations have tried to do the same thing. Took what was a very hotly disputed social issue and wanted to override the scriptural mandates that were held dear by Sunrise. And he was wrong from a legal standpoint. And that has been borne out by subsequent court decisions. He was just flat out wrong from a legal standpoint. He did not have a correct legal position. Now, it may be that Governor Beshear and I have to stand before the Lord to find out whether he was right or Sunrise was right with respect to the moral aspect of it. But quite frankly, I don't think we got to wait that long. I think the scriptures are very clear about that. So, but I was very intrigued by this case, but I was also upset from this standpoint. If you litigate long enough, you realize that when you argue a case to a jury, they bring a lot of common sense into the room. And that's really what you need to appeal to. If you want to be a successful trial lawyer, you appeal to a jury's common sense. And here's the common sense aspect of all of this. If Governor Beshear's motivation was he wanted children to be served without discrimination, then why in the world would you cut the contract of Sunrise Children's Services, which was the largest provider of these foster care and adoption services, these in-house treatment, residential treatment services? Why would you cut their contract? We have children sleeping in government offices because we don't have enough foster care parents. And yet you want to cut the contract of an organization that is doing a very tremendous job with limited resources to find homes for these children, to provide treatment for these children, to find forever families for these children. And you're going to cut them out because they want to follow the scriptures? And this is coming from a governor who's a lawyer and a professing Christian. And it bothered me. I'll be honest with you. It really bothered me. I would like for Governor Beshear to tell me. I would love to do this publicly. I would give Governor Beshear a public opportunity. If he would like to discuss these issues with me publicly, I would be glad to do that, because I'd like to know the answer to that. Because that makes no sense whatsoever, that you would basically cripple Sunrise with all of it's done for the children of Kentucky because they disagree with you on these issues. And here's another thing that bothers me in this particular area. A lot of this is pseudoscience, quite frankly. A man cannot become a woman, and a woman cannot become a man. That's just foolish. Anyone who says otherwise is foolish. They're ignoring science. They're ignoring reality. I would think that someone who grew up in horse country, quite frankly, would understand this. If you take a stallion, if you castrate that stallion doesn't become a mare, becomes a gelding. You can give that gelding hormones. You can go out there and tell that gelding every day you're really a mare, but you know what? It's not. It will never be a mare. And the same thing with people. You can lie to people and you can deceive people, and you can fall into their own deceptions and try to encourage this, but it's not science. It's not reality. It's wrong. You wouldn't even have to look at the scriptures to know it's wrong. It's simply wrong. And again, why would you try to force these types of things on organizations who are trying to operate according to their scriptural beliefs, but serve mankind in great ways, like so many faith-based organizations do? Why attack those organizations using false science and things you know aren't true? Again, I would like to have answers to these, but I've not seen them and not gotten them.
So this helped obviously move the needle towards your decision to come to work for Sunrise, but how difficult a decision was that to leave an established law practice and uproot your family and move from Georgia to Kentucky?
Well, it kind of transitioned from at first kind of a difficult uh, position in a way because my wife and I have been very involved in the community. I served on the school board in my community for 17 years. We were very involved in our church of 26 years. I do a lot of lay speaking in our denomination down there, sometimes 4 or 5 times a year, sometimes 30 times a year, just depending on the need. And I had coached football, high school football down there because I was a certified community coach. I'd coached the mock trial team at the high school, and we had friends and family. I've got grandchildren there, so at first, I thought, wow, we're going to be leaving all of this if we go to serve Sunrise. And so I prayed. I said, Lord, I said, you please convince me that I'm making the right move. I want to do what's right, but I need to know. And what happened was it got to where all I could think about was Sunrise, and my love and passion for litigation started to wane, while my thoughts and passion for Sunrise just continued to grow. And then, as far as leaving our grandchildren and our children, we have three grown children, and leaving our grandchildren, my wife and I discussed that. Our children have been provided a good home, and they've been provided a good spiritual background. They know right from wrong. Financially, they're fine. Same with our grandchildren. But the children that Sunrise serves, they haven't had those opportunities. They haven't had the spiritual upbringing that they should have. They haven't had sometimes the resources that children need to grow up properly. And we could help provide that. And so we knew that was the right thing to do. And I guess it's kind of like David Livingston. I can't quote it, but I remember when he was asked about sacrificing, to go to Africa as a missionary, and he said, put that word away. It's not a sacrifice; it's a privilege. How can it be a sacrifice to go and do something God has called you to do that He gives you such a joy and passion and peace about doing? And I have found that to be true. As much as I loved my church and I love my family, I haven't had the homesickness or anything that I thought that I would have, because I am at total peace that I'm where God wanted my wife and I to be.
Last question. You are the Vice President for Strategic and Legal Affairs. How in that role do you envision yourself serving Sunrise and the children of Kentucky?
Yes, sir. And I think from the legal standpoint, hopefully, and certainly I think with the current presidential administration, some of these battles that intrigued me and got me more interested in Sunrise are behind us, at least for some period of time. Do I think they'll come back? Well, they very well could, depending on what happens on the federal level, and quite frankly, what may happen here at the state level. I do think that I will save Sunrise money by being in-house counsel. And that part of it's good. One thing I think that is good when you have in-house counsel is I can be very responsive, because I know the difference. As a lawyer in a law firm, you've got all kinds of cases going, you've got all kinds of clients, you're trying to keep everyone happy, and sometimes it might take you a little bit to respond to a client. Whereas here, I have one client and I can respond very quickly, and I think that has already been appreciated. The strategic role, I think Dale probably noticed I'm 65 years old, and when you've lived a pretty long life, although 65 looks way younger than it did 20 years ago, you learn a few things. And hopefully you get a little bit of wisdom about you. And I think that Dale is hoping that with the legal experience and advising businesses, because as a lawyer you handle business clients, you give them some business advice as well. And coming in from outside the organization, that maybe I could take a fresh look at things. And I hope that I will be able to really help in that role. But I tell you what I can't improve upon, and that is Sunrise has so many employees who are there because it's a ministry. They're not paid enough. What we ask them to do is difficult and heartbreaking at times, and stressful, but they are committed because they love the Lord, their God, with all their heart, their mind, and their strength. And in that part, I wouldn't be able to improve upon because they've got great people. But the other things, I hope that I can help them with.
Well, Lewis, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for following the Lord's leading to choose Sunrise. And glad you're in Kentucky. Look forward to working with you and talking to you again in the future.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and a real honor for you to talk with me today. Thank you so much.
To read Lewis Hatcher's story and more, go to KentuckyToday.com. And while you're there, sign up for the Morning Briefing, our daily news digest email. And for more on the Kentucky Baptist Convention and the cooperative program that makes this podcast possible, go to kybaptist.org. Lord willing, we'll see you next time on the Kentucky Today podcast.